I read you in the comments.
On a night that seemed ordinary, the sky began changing in strange ways. A deep red blood moon rose above the horizon, casting an eerie glow across the clouds. Soon after, flashes of light began appearing inside the thick storm clouds. For brief moments, the light formed patterns that some witnesses said looked almost like a figure standing in the sky, arms stretched wide between the rays. As videos spread across social media, reports of an unusual snowstorm in nearby regions added even more mystery to the night. People everywhere began asking the same question. Was it simply lightning, or something that looked almost human? Watch until the end, and if this moment makes you curious, like the video and share your thoughts below. Night fell slowly, and with it came a silence that many people would later remember. The sky was unusually calm, the air still, and the stars began appearing one by one across the darkness. Instead of the familiar pale glow that usually lights the night, the moon slowly revealed a deep red color. At first, it looked faint, almost hidden behind the darkness. Then, as it climbed higher, the color deepened into a dark crimson shade that illuminated the sky with an eerie glow. Within minutes, people began pointing upward, phones were raised, cameras began recording. Across neighborhoods and cities, the same reaction repeated itself. Quiet voices, surprised whispers, and eyes fixed on the sky. The moon had turned red. Many immediately recognized the phenomenon as a blood moon, a rare moment when the moon appears crimson during a lunar eclipse. Scientists have long explained the process, but for many believers the sight carries a deeper meaning. Because long before telescopes existed, the Bible had already spoken about such a moment. One ancient passage from the book of Joel began appearing again and again as people shared images of the sky. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. Joel 2:31. These words were written thousands of years ago, yet on that night they suddenly felt vivid and alive. The red moon hung in the sky like a silent signal. The clouds remained still, the wind barely moved. It was as if the entire sky had paused for a moment that people could not ignore. For centuries, blood moons have captured the imagination of believers and scholars alike. Throughout biblical history, unusual signs in the heavens were often seen as moments that made humanity stop and reflect. In the Gospel of Luke, another passage speaks about the sky itself becoming a sign. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. And on the earth distress of nations. Luke 21:25. That verse began circulating across social media as people shared photos of the crimson moon. Some observers simply admired the beauty of the sky. Others felt a deeper sense of awe, as if the night carried a quiet message. Many stepped outside to watch in silence. Some prayed. Others stood together, staring upward as the red moon slowly climbed higher above the horizon. It was not loud. There was no thunder, no storm, no dramatic noise. Instead, the moment felt strangely peaceful, yet powerful at the same time. The moon glowed deep red against the darkness, reflecting sunlight filtered through the Earth's atmosphere. Scientifically, it was a perfectly natural event. But emotionally, the sight stirred something ancient within people. Because for thousands of years, humanity has looked to the sky not only for light, but for meaning. But the Bible often describes the heavens as a place where signs can appear, moments that remind people to pause, to reflect, and to remember their faith. On that night, many viewers felt exactly that. The red moon hung above the world like a quiet reminder that the sky still has the power to capture human attention in ways nothing else can. Slowly, as time passed, the deep crimson color began to fade. The moon gradually returned to its normal pale glow, and the night resumed its usual calm. But the memory of the moment remained. Images of the blood moon continued spreading across the internet. Conversations about scripture and prophecy filled comment sections and discussion forums. Some people called it a beautiful astronomical event. Others called it a reminder of ancient biblical words. Yet, almost everyone who witnessed it shared the same feeling. For a brief moment, when the moon turned red and the sky fell silent, the world seemed to pause and look upward, remembering that the heavens have always held a place in both science and faith. And whether people saw it as a natural eclipse or something more symbolic, the night of the blood moon left one clear impression. Sometimes the sky reminds humanity to stop and simply look toward the heavens. The night of the blood moon had already passed, leaving behind a quiet sense of wonder. Hours earlier, people had stood outside staring at the sky as the moon slowly turned a deep crimson red. Many had spoken about scripture, about ancient verses that mentioned the moon turning to blood, but by the next morning the sky seemed calm again. Or at least, it appeared that way at first. The morning began peacefully. A cool breeze moved through the air, and the horizon was covered with thick, drifting clouds. They were not violent storm clouds, but heavy enough to soften the sunlight and turn the sky into a pale, gray canvas. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then, someone noticed a brief flash of light inside the clouds. It wasn't the sharp bolt of lightning people normally expect. Instead, the light appeared deep within the clouds themselves, a quick glow that illuminated a patch of sky before disappearing again. A few seconds passed. Then another flash appeared. People began pointing upward. Phones came out again. Cameras started recording as the flashes continued appearing in different parts of the cloud layer. Each burst lasted only a moment, almost like a distant lamp flickering somewhere behind the sky. As more people began watching, something else caught their attention. Between the drifting clouds and the sudden flashes of light, a shape began forming, not clearly, not perfectly, but just enough to make people pause. For a few brief seconds, the brighter sections of the clouds seemed to outline something that looked almost like a figure. The more the cloud shifted, the more the mind tried to recognize patterns inside the moving clouds. The more the cloud shifted, the more the shape seemed to change. Sometimes it looked like nothing more than scattered light. Other times, the outline appeared again for a moment before dissolving back into the gray sky. People standing outside began discussing what they were seeing. The videos quickly began spreading online, and suggested it was simply lightning hidden inside the storm clouds above. The videos quickly began spreading online, and the debate followed them. Viewers paused the footage frame by frame, trying to see the shape others were describing. Some viewers believed it resembled a figure. Others said it was simply lightning inside the storm clouds. Meteorologists later explained that lightning often occurs deep within thick clouds, lighting them from the inside rather than producing visible bolts. When this happens, the entire cloud can briefly glow, creating unusual shapes depending on how the light spreads through the vapor. But even with that explanation, the timing of the event made people curious. Just hours earlier, the sky had displayed a blood moon, a sight many had already connected with ancient scripture. Now, at the following morning, the clouds themselves seemed to glow with mysterious flashes of light. For some observers, the moment felt strangely symbolic. One verse from the Bible began circulating again as people shared the videos. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Luke 21:25. The words were written thousands of years ago, Yet many viewers felt they echoed the strange sequence of events unfolding across the sky. Occurs deep inside thick storm clouds. The lightning is actually a type of plasma. Plasma is a state of matter that is neither solid, liquid, nor gas. It's a fourth state of matter, and it's the most common state of matter in the universe. Plasma is made up of charged particles like electrons and ions that are constantly moving around. When lightning occurs deep inside thick storm clouds, the plasma is heated to very high temperatures, which causes it to glow. The glow is what we see as lightning. So, when you see lightning, you're actually seeing a type of plasma. It's a fascinating and beautiful phenomenon that we're still learning about. Occurs deep inside thick storm clouds, the light can spread through the entire cloud structure. To observers on the ground, it can look almost like the cloud itself is glowing from within. As the morning continued, the flashes slowly became less frequent. The clouds began thinning, and sunlight gradually broke through the gray layers above. Within an hour, the sky returned to its usual calm appearance. But the moment had already been captured. Videos continued circulating across the internet. People replayed the footage again and again, searching for the brief seconds when the cloud and light seemed to form something almost human. Some believed it was simply lightning. Others believed the moment felt far more mysterious. But nearly everyone who saw the footage shared the same reaction. For a few brief minutes that morning, as light flickered inside the clouds and the sky seemed to glow from within, people stopped what they were doing and simply looked up, wondering what they had just witnessed. By the afternoon, the sky seemed unsettled again. The thick clouds that had drifted across the morning sky were still there, slowly moving above the horizon. The sunlight struggled to break through them, leaving the world below in a strange, dim glow. At first, everything felt quiet. Then it came. A deep roll of thunder echoed across the sky. The sound was distant at first, like a low rumble moving through the clouds. People paused for a moment, expecting the familiar signs that usually follow. Wind picking up, the first drops of rain tapping softly against rooftops and pavement. But nothing came. The ground remained dry. A few seconds later, another thunderclap followed. This one louder, sharper, cutting through the heavy air like a sudden warning. The sound bounced across the horizon, echoing through the clouds above. Still, no rain fell. People stepped outside again, looking toward the sky. The clouds above were thick and layered, but strangely still. No streaks of lightning appeared, no rushing wind, no dark curtain of rain moving across the distance. Just thunder, rolling again and again through the sky. Thunder rolled across the sky, but the ground stayed dry. It rolled slowly across the sky, deep and powerful, like something moving high above the clouds where no one could see. People looked upward, searching for lightning, but the clouds revealed nothing. Some described the sound as unsettling. Thunder is something most people expect to hear during a storm, a warning that rain and lightning are on the way. But when thunder echoes across the sky without any rain falling, it creates a strange tension in the air. The sky feels alive, yet motionless at the same time. The ground remains dry, and the silence between each rumble feels longer than usual. As the thunder continued, some observers began remembering another passage from the Bible, a verse that speaks about the power of thunder itself. The voice of the Lord thunders over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. Psalm 29:3. For centuries, thunder has been described in Scripture as something more than just a sound. In biblical language, it was often portrayed as a powerful voice echoing through the heavens. Hearing thunder roll through the sky without rain made some people pause and reflect on those ancient words. Yet meteorologists offered a more grounded explanation. Sometimes thunder can travel long distances through the atmosphere, especially when the air is heavy and humid. A lightning strike might occur many miles away, hidden behind distant clouds, while the thunder continues rolling across the sky far beyond where the storm actually exists. But from the ground, again, watching the clouds, waiting for something more to happen. But nothing did. No lightning bolts cut across the sky. No rain began falling from the clouds above. The thunder simply rolled across the horizon a few more times before slowly fading into silence. Gradually, the heavy atmosphere began to lift. The clouds shifted. Joe had stood outside listening to the thunder. The moment lingered. Because hearing thunder without rain leaves behind a strange feeling, like the sky had spoken for a moment, and then chosen to remain silent again. The thunder had finally faded. For several long minutes, the sky remained strangely quiet again. The heavy clouds still hung above the horizon, but the deep rolling sound that had echoed through the air slowly disappeared. People who had stepped outside began returning to their routines, believing the strange sequence of events had finally ended. But the sky was not finished yet. The first sign came almost unnoticed. A single white speck drifted slowly through the air. At first, it looked like dust caught in the light. Then another appeared, and another. Someone looked closer. Snow. It seemed impossible at first. Only minutes earlier the sky had been filled with thunder. Yet now small white flakes were beginning to fall quietly from the clouds above. Within moments, the air filled with them. The flakes grew thicker, larger, falling faster, as if the sky had suddenly opened. What began as a few scattered flakes quickly turned into a dense curtain of white. People stopped again and looked upward. The snowfall intensified. Within minutes, the ground began to change color. Dark pavement slowly disappeared beneath a thin layer of white. Rooftops softened. Cars parked along the streets became dusted with snow. The transformation was happening fast. The wind carried the flakes sideways through the air, swirling between buildings and across empty streets. Streetlights flickered on as the sky dimmed, and their yellow glow illuminated thousands of flakes spinning wildly through the air. Under the lamps, the snowfall looked almost like a blizzard. Only a short time earlier, the sky had echoed with thunder, a sound most people associate with warm storms and rain. Yet now the air had cooled rapidly, and snow was falling heavily from the same clouds. Meteorologists sometimes describe this kind of sudden shift as a rapid atmospheric change, when cold air quickly moves into a storm system and transforms the precipitation. But from the ground, it felt far more dramatic. Within an hour, entire neighborhoods were covered. The sidewalks disappeared beneath a growing layer of snow. Trees slowly gathered white branches. Parked cars became silent shapes beneath the falling flakes. Traffic slowed. People walked more carefully, and everywhere. The same quiet reaction appeared again. People pausing just long enough to take in the sudden transformation of the landscape. Cameras came out once more. Videos began circulating online showing streets illuminated by streetlights, where snow poured down in thick waves through the yellow beams of light. In some clips, the snowfall was so dense it looked almost like fog made of ice. One video showed a long, empty road where the snow swirled endlessly under the lamps, the flakes spinning and dancing through the air as if the storm itself had suddenly awakened. The speed of the snowfall surprised many observers. In only a few hours, large areas were completely covered. What had once been dark streets and sidewalks now looked like a quiet white landscape, stretching beneath the clouds. Some people stepped outside just to feel the flakes falling around them. Others watched from windows, amazed by how quickly the world had changed. Earlier that day, the sky had flashed with strange lightning hidden in the clouds. Then thunder rolled across the horizon without rain. Now, snow was falling in thick waves beneath the same sky. The sequence of events left many people wondering how quickly the atmosphere above can transform, because sometimes the sky does not change slowly. Sometimes it shifts all at once. One moment the clouds are silent. The next moment thunder echoes through them. And before anyone fully understands what is happening, to slow. And eventually the flakes grew to slow. And eventually the flakes grew lighter until only a few drifted through the air. The sky remained gray, but the world below had already transformed. Roads, rooftops, and trees were now covered in a soft white layer, as if the storm had wrapped the landscape in silence. For a while, everything seemed to settle. Cars moved slowly through the snowy streets. People stepped outside again, brushing snow from their jackets and watching their breath fade into the cold air. It felt as if the strange sequence of weather events had finally ended. But not long after the snowfall faded, the sky shifted once more. At first, it was only a faint sound. A sharp tapping noise echoed across a rooftop somewhere nearby. Then another, and another. People looked upward again. Seconds. The tapping grew louder, faster. Seconds. The tapping grew louder, faster, more aggressive. Tiny pieces of ice were now falling from the sky. Hail. The first stones were small, bouncing harmlessly across the snow-covered ground. But the storm above quickly intensified. Within moments, the sky began releasing dozens, and then hundreds of ice pellets that struck rooftops, windows, and parked cars. The sound grew overwhelming. Hailstones slammed against metal surfaces with sharp cracking noises. Glass windows rattled. Car alarms suddenly began echoing through the streets as the frozen stones bounced violently off windshields. People ran for cover. Those who had just stepped outside hurried back indoors. Others dashed beneath building entrances or into nearby vehicles, trying to avoid the sudden storm of ice falling from above. The hail grew larger. Some stones were now the size of marbles, striking the ground with enough force to shatter into smaller fragments. Each impact echoed sharply against the frozen streets. The sky seemed relentless. Ice hammered against rooftops and doors in rapid bursts. The once peaceful snowfall had turned into something far more chaotic. A storm that sounded like thousands of stones being thrown from the sky. Despite the danger, many people pulled out their phones again. From behind windows, beneath covered entrances, and from inside cars, cameras began recording the sudden hailstorm. Videos quickly appeared online showing ice bouncing wildly across snowy sidewalks while loud impacts echoed across the neighborhood. The scene looked almost surreal. Snow still covered the ground from the earlier storm, yet now hard white hailstones were raining down across the same landscape. Streetlights reflected off the flying ice as the storm intensified, turning the air into a chaotic swirl of frozen pellets. Some viewers watching the videos later described the moment as frightening, because the sequence of events now felt impossible to ignore. First, the strange blood moon had appeared in the night sky. Then, flashes of light had flickered inside the clouds the next morning. Thunder rolled across the sky without rain. A sudden snowstorm followed. And now hail was falling violently from the same clouds. One unusual event might be explained easily, but when so many strange changes happen within such a short time, people naturally begin to wonder. Standing behind windows, watching ice strike the ground again and again, Many observers began asking the same quiet question. What was happening to the sky? Some whispered that the weather had simply become unstable, and others wondered if something bigger was unfolding, something they could not yet understand. The hail continued crashing down for several more minutes before finally slowing. The sharp impacts softened. Then gradually the sky grew quiet again. The ice stopped falling, but the unease remained. Because after witnessing storm after storm, thunder without rain, snow that buried the streets, and now ice falling violently from the clouds, one thought had begun spreading among those watching the sky. If what had happened was just the beginning, then what would happen next? After hours of chaos in the sky, something began to change. The thunder had faded. The hail had finally stopped striking rooftops and streets. Snow still rested quietly on the ground, and small pieces of ice from the storm remained scattered across sidewalks and roads. For a while, the clouds above hung heavy and gray, as if the sky itself was exhausted. But slowly, almost gently, the light began to return. At first, it was only a faint glow behind the thick clouds. The gray sky softened slightly as sunlight pushed through the lingering layers of storm clouds. People who had stayed indoors cautiously stepped outside again, looking up toward the horizon to see if the strange weather had finally passed. Then, someone noticed color. It appeared faint at first, barely visible against the fading clouds. A soft band of red, then orange, slowly forming across the sky where the sunlight met the retreating storm. Within minutes, the colors grew stronger. A rainbow was forming. The arc stretched slowly across the sky, growing brighter as the clouds continued to break apart. Red blended into orange, then yellow, green, blue, and violet, each color becoming clearer as the sunlight illuminated the last drifting mist from the storm. After everything that had happened, the sight felt almost unreal. Only hours earlier, the sky had been filled with thunder that echoed without rain. A sudden snowstorm had buried the streets beneath white layers. Hailstones had fallen violently from the clouds, sending people running for shelter. Now, above the same sky, a quiet arc of color stretched peacefully across the horizon. People stopped walking. Cars slowed. Phones appeared once again, but this time not out of fear. Instead, many were capturing the unexpected beauty of the moment. The rainbow stood high above the landscape, its colors reflecting softly against the fading clouds. Beneath it, the streets still carried the signs of the storm: wet pavement, scattered ice, and snow-covered rooftops. But the atmosphere felt different now, lighter, calmer, almost hopeful. For many observers, the sight of the rainbow carried a deeper meaning. In the Bible, the rainbow is more than a natural phenomenon. It appears as a powerful symbol after one of the most dramatic storms ever described in Scripture. In the book of Genesis, after the great flood had passed and the skies had finally cleared, God spoke to Noah and gave a sign in the heavens: "I have set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." Genesis 9:13. For centuries, that verse has been remembered as a message of promise and renewal, a reminder that even after the most powerful storms, peace can return. Standing beneath the sky that day, many people quietly remembered those words. The rainbow above them seemed almost perfectly timed. After thunder, snow, lightning, and hail, the sky had finally revealed something calm and beautiful. Scientists explain that rainbows appear when sunlight passes through tiny droplets of water remaining in the air after a storm. The droplets bend and reflect the light, separating it into the spectrum of colors that form the arc we see in the sky. It is a simple and beautiful interaction of light and water. Yet, for those who witnessed it that day, the rainbow felt like more than just physics, because sometimes, After the sky has shown its most violent power, it chooses to end the story with something quiet, something peaceful, something that reminds people to look up not only with fear or confusion, but with hope. And beneath that wide arc of color stretching across the sky, many people stood silently for a moment, watching as the final sign of the storm slowly faded into the returning light. By the time the sky finally cleared, the world below looked almost peaceful again. The thunder had faded into silence. The snow that had fallen so suddenly now rested quietly across rooftops and streets. Pieces of hail still lay scattered on the ground, slowly melting under the returning sunlight. And above it all, the rainbow that had stretched across the sky had slowly disappeared into the fading clouds. What remained was calm, but also questions. Over the course of only a short time, the sky had revealed a sequence of unusual moments. First, the blood moon glowing deep red in the night. Then, flashes of light appearing inside the clouds the following morning. Thunder rolling across the sky without rain. A sudden snowstorm covering the ground. Hailstones striking rooftops and windows. And finally, a quiet rainbow forming after the storm had passed. Individually, each of these events can be explained. Meteorologists understand how lunar eclipses create the red glow of a blood moon. Lightning hidden inside thick clouds can cause sudden flashes of light. Thunder can travel long distances through the atmosphere. Rapid changes in temperature can turn rain into snow or hail within the same storm system. From a scientific perspective, these moments may simply be rare combinations of natural weather. And yet, when people witness several unusual events unfolding so closely together, it often makes them pause. Because throughout history, the sky has always held a powerful place in human imagination. Ancient civilizations watched the heavens carefully, believing that changes above might carry meaning for the world below. Even today, when we understand much more about the atmosphere and the science behind storms, the sky can still surprise us. Moments like these have a way of slowing people down. They make people step outside, look upward, and think. Some observers saw nothing more than unusual weather patterns moving through the atmosphere. Others felt the sequence of events carried a deeper symbolism, a reminder of how powerful and unpredictable the natural world can be. But regardless of what people believed, the sky had done something remarkable. For a brief time, it captured everyone's attention. Phones were lifted. Videos were shared. Conversations spread across communities and across the internet. People who might never have spoken about the sky before were suddenly discussing the same events, asking the same questions. What exactly had they witnessed? Was it simply a rare combination of natural phenomena, or something that felt more mysterious because of the way the events unfolded, one after another? Perhaps the answer depends on the person watching. Because sometimes the sky changes in ways that go far beyond the storm itself. Ways that remind people how small they are beneath the vast atmosphere above them. Ways that make them stop, even for just a moment, and look upward with curiosity. And sometimes the sky changes in ways that make people look up and ask questions deeper than the storm itself. If this story made you pause and wonder, like the video and share your thoughts in the comments below.
Good morning. Let's go straight to those growing tensions in the Middle East.
An unexpected moment unfolded in Mecca, and for a brief instant the world seemed to stop and look up. It started with movement in the sky, birds circling above the Kaaba, then came the wind, the storm, and flashes of lightning that turned night into sudden light. Some people said they felt the ground shake. Others claimed they saw things they couldn't explain. Within hours, videos flooded the internet, sparking debates, prayers, and endless questions. Was it simply nature? Or something that felt bigger than coincidence? Stay with us until the end, and if you're curious, like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The evening moved with its usual rhythm. Thousands of pilgrims circled the Kaaba in quiet devotion, their footsteps steady, their attention fixed on prayer. The air felt calm, familiar, almost timeless. Nothing suggested that anything unusual was about to happen, until heads slowly began to turn upward. Birds were gathering above the courtyard. At first, only a few shapes crossed the lights. Then more appeared. Within minutes, the sky above the Kaaba filled with movement, not chaotic, not scattered, but controlled. The birds circled in wide, repeating patterns, returning again and again to the same space directly over the sacred center. They did not drift toward the city. They did not spread across the horizon. They stayed focused, as if drawn by something unseen, and the rhythm below began to change. Pilgrims continued walking, but more slowly now. Some paused briefly, watching in silence. Others raised their phones, recording the strange sight as the birds traced near-perfect loops overhead. The sound of wings grew louder, a soft but constant flutter that blended with the low murmur of prayer. It was not loud enough to cause panic, but strong enough to make people aware that the atmosphere had shifted. What made the moment unsettling was not chaos, but precision. The birds did not fly randomly. They moved together, tightening and widening their circles in synchronized waves. At times, their numbers grew so dense that the lights above the courtyard seemed to dim for a second before brightening again. The Kaaba remained still at the center, unmoved, while the air above it churned with restless motion. Some pilgrims whispered quietly to one another, unsure what to make of it. One witness later described the moment simply. It felt like they were being pulled to one place, like they didn't want to leave. The feeling spread through the crowd, not fear, but curiosity mixed with unease. People kept watching, waiting for the birds to break away, yet they continued circling as if following an invisible boundary no one could see. The contrast was striking. Below, calm devotion. Above, constant motion. Ancient words came to mind for some who witnessed the scene. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands. Psalm 19:1. No one rushed to assign meaning. Some believed it was simply nature, birds drawn to the lights. Others felt the timing and the pattern were difficult to ignore. The uncertainty itself became part of the moment, pulling attention upward again and again. More videos were recorded. More eyes followed the sky. The birds continued their loops without scattering, as if the entire night sky had narrowed to a single point above the Kaaba. The air felt heavier now, not because anything dramatic had happened, but because everyone sensed that what they were seeing was unusual, something rarely witnessed in a place known for order and stillness. And as the circling continued, a quiet question lingered among the crowd. Was this only a passing moment, or the beginning of something no one expected? And the birds kept circling above the Kaaba, refusing to leave, and just as the crowd began to settle into uneasy silence, the air itself started to change. The air changed without warning. One moment the courtyard felt steady. The next, the wind pushed through in sharp, uneven bursts. It moved across the marble floor with growing force, tugging at garments and sending loose fabric snapping in the air. Pilgrims slowed their steps, glancing around as the calm rhythm of the evening began to shift. The birds were still circling above the Kaaba, but now their wings cut through an atmosphere that felt heavier, tighter, as if the sky itself was preparing for something. The wind strengthened again. Dust that had rested quietly along the ground suddenly lifted, first in thin lines, then in wider streams. It rolled across the courtyard like smoke, sliding between footsteps before rising higher. The lights caught the particles, turning the air hazy. People instinctively covered their faces or narrowed their eyes, watching as the dust moved in restless waves. It no longer felt like a simple breeze. The gusts came harder, pushing from different directions. Dust swirled into brief spirals, twisting upward before breaking apart. The movement gave the unsettling impression that the air was spinning, searching for shape. Some pilgrims stepped closer together, others paused entirely, or their attention pulled away from the ground and toward the horizon where the sky seemed to darken. The atmosphere grew tense. Each burst of wind carried more dust, thicker than before, until the air itself began to feel heavy. The courtyard lights looked softer now, slightly blurred behind the moving haze. From certain angles, it felt as though a wall of dust was slowly forming. Not yet a storm, but the beginning of one. A pilgrim later described the moment quietly. It felt like the desert was moving toward us. That feeling spread through the crowd, not panic, but awareness. The wind was no longer random. It came in powerful waves, lifting dust high enough that, for brief moments, the outlines of the buildings softened. The air smelled dry, sharp, almost electric. The birds above tightened their circles. They no longer drifted wide, but moved faster, lower, as if reacting to the same force pushing through the courtyard. Below, the Kaaba remained still, dark and steady at the center while everything around it seemed to shift. Some people remembered ancient words as the wind grew stronger. The Lord has his way in the whirlwind and in the storm. Nahum 1:3. Not as an answer, only as a thought that surfaced while watching the air transform. Another gust hit, stronger than the last. Dust rose in thick waves, sweeping across the marble floor and climbing higher into the air. For a moment, visibility seemed to shrink. The edges of the courtyard blurred. Garments fluttered violently. Loose items skidded across the ground before being caught again by the wind. It felt as if a sandstorm might arrive at any moment. The air pressed against faces, dry and relentless, carrying the weight of the desert itself. Conversations faded. The sound of wind replaced the quiet murmur that had filled the space earlier. People looked toward the sky, then toward the horizon, waiting for whatever might come next. The tension was no longer subtle. The wind circled through the open space, pulling dust into moving columns that appeared and vanished within seconds. Each gust felt stronger, more determined, as though the atmosphere was building towards something unseen. Even those who tried to continue walking felt the change, the sense that calm had given way to anticipation. Another line from Scripture echoed quietly among some observers. "You sweep them away like a flood, they are like a dream." Psalm 95.